topic that we have chosen today is very, very relevant. And over the next 4 weeks, we'll cover different aspects of calcium problems and pathophysiology, including hypocalcemia, hypercalcemia, rickets, and renal tubular acidosis. Month-old boy with respiratory distress who also had hepatomegaly and cardiac failure was in fact admitted under the cardiac unit. So this child was admitted as cardiomyopathy in the cardiac unit with a very low ejection fraction. And at that point of time, when they evaluated further, they found that the child actually had prolonged QT interval and was found to have hypocalcemia. And then the referral was done to us. And what we found that this child actually had a vitamin D deficiency. And now we know how severe vitamin D deficiency can cause cardiomyopathy. Now, this was those early ages when this was not really easily available and was not really informed. So unfortunately, this child had to go on ventilator and a lot of other complications happen. But till date, also, we occasionally see patients with cardiomyopathy. So hypocalcemia is a significant cause of concern, and we need to have a proper evaluation, assessment, and management to identify in that regards. All of you can go and have a look at our website, learning.rosesociety.in, which has got a lot of information about pediatric endocrinology, including e-learning resources in the form of YouTube videos, our platform, which has got validated tools for assessment, as well as courses for fellowship programs and postgraduate programs, also courses, which are a lot of modules available. We routinely conduct grand rounds, the postgraduate lecture series, as well as specific rounds related to pediatric endocrinologists on a monthly basis. We have got publications which can be accessed both in an e-version as well as the hardcore version and the mobile application, which really allows evaluation and management of pediatric endocrine disorders very easily. So what I'm going to do today is that we'll talk a bit about pathophysiology to begin with, then we'll talk about criteria and etiology. And then from there, we'll talk about assessment, management, and finally, since this is directed more towards pediatricians and postgraduates, we'll also have some very practical questions which have been prepared in the form of OSCEs, as well as questions which will be highlighted. 3 basic questions which we have to answer. Is it really hypocalcemia? If it is hypocalcemia, what is the site, whether it is vitamin D or PTH? And finally, what's the cause in that perspective? So when do we suspect hypocalcemia? Already we have discussed this, and Vibha also mentioned that anybody with seizures, apnea, and tetany, we all know that this is hypocalcemia. We also need to think of hypocalcemia in the setting of seizures, particularly in children with seizures, where often calcium is not done in everybody. Cardiac failure and cardiomyopathy, which may be an important etiology. Intracranial calcification, very important in the setting of chronic hypocalcemia. Raised intracranial hypertension, benign intracranial hypertension, headache, and visual complaints, again very important. Stridor, which is again a marker of laryngospasm, and cataract, which is a marker of chronic hypocalcemia. So any of these settings you should evaluate immediately for calcium levels. Of course, if there is a preterm baby or somebody who is small for gestational age and has got features of DiGeorge syndrome, we have to think of a possibility of hypocalcemia as well. Now, very importantly, we may sometimes not have features of hypocalcemia, but we have latent features like Chvostek sign. So if you tap around the facial nerve, you will see twitching of the eye, and you have Trausios sign when you make decreased blood flow ischemia. There will be a tetany which will be induced, and you can use these signs to identify hypocalcemia in that regards. When you're assessing calcium, remember it should be done in a serum sample in the fasting state. The problem, of course, is that if there is hypoalbuminemia, the calcium levels may be falsely low. And if the protein levels are high, you may have false hypercalcemia, which you have to be wary and aware about that. We can correct the calcium. So for every 1 gram per DL decrease in albumin, the calcium goes down by 0.8. So you can correct it by adding 0.8 milligram per DL per albumin decrease from that regard. So we already discussed that we need to have different figures for preterm and term infants. So anybody based upon birth weight less than 7 total and more than 1500 less than 8 becomes significant. Beyond the neonatal period, we have a normal range of 8.6, which defines hypocalcemia. And of course, ionic calcium would be preferable in that regards. Preterm babies will have lower levels as discussed. One of the very important aspects to assess in the setting of calcium deficiency is also serum phosphorus. which should be done in the morning fasting state. The caution, of course, here is that you should not be using a tourniquet or a squeeze sample, because this basically is an intracellular ion and you may cause raise in terms of these levels. We have to interpret in terms of age specific levels, which becomes very, very important. And phosphorus levels tend to be high during infancy and childhood because they are markers of bone formation and bone turnover, and phosphorus levels need to be corrected. And often if we look at the adult data, we may falsely say the phosphorus level is high when it is actually normal in that regards. And this is something important we'll discuss subsequently in that perspective. Now, once we know this is hypocalcemia, the next issue is, of course, further evaluation. So, of course, if we have very early onset neonatal hypocalcemia in the first 3 days, we have to think of a possibility of prematurity, small for gestational age, and infant or diabetic mother. There is also a possibility that the mother may actually have hypercalcemia, and because of this hypercalcemia, the PTH gland gets suppressed, and there is a rebound hypocalcemia which may happen in the children. And this is something that's why the maternal calcium becomes very important to assess in that regards, and that's an important part to look at from that perspective. Now, beyond that, depending upon the duration from 3 days to 3 weeks, the possibility we have to think of a hypomagnesemia and hypoparathyroidism as important causes. And as discussed earlier, beyond 3 weeks, vitamin D deficiency becomes an important cause to evaluate. We have to, of course, look for mother's history of diabetes, eclampsia, hyperparathyroidism, and assess calcium phosphorus, as we were discussing, to identify this case. In children, of course, we have to look at the gestation, the birth weight, the Apgar scores to look at hypoxia, exchange transfusion, feeding, and all those regards become important. Examination should look at the facies to look at specific features for Digeot syndrome, look for cleft lip, cleft palate, have a careful cardiac evaluation, look for murmurs and features of Digeot syndrome and rickets, which become important. In the post-neonatal period, we have to look for features of hemolysis, tumor lysis, or rhabdomyolysis. If there are nails which are atrophic, think of a possibility of autoimmune polyendocrinopathy, as Vibha was talking about. And if there is rickets, think of a vitamin D dependent causes. Specific history for phenytoin, phenobarbital, which can really impair the vitamin D. Metabolism becomes important. And if you have brachymetacarpia, short fourth metacarpal, calcification, cataract, think of pseudohypoparathyroidism as a possibility. Recurrent infection in a child with absent thymus, think of Digeot syndrome as a possibility in that regards. Also ask for features of renal failure, liver disease, and malabsorption. The initial workup and the most important test to look at in the setting of hypocalcemia is phosphorus. So we expect the phosphorus to be low in hypocalcemia. If your phosphorus is high, think of a PTH-related cause. Creatinine, of course, to rule out renal failure. Magnesium in anybody who has chronic hypokalemia, chronic hypocalcemia, measure magnesium levels. And if the urinary calcium is high in the setting of hypocalcemia, think of a calcium sensing receptor defect, which can cause an issue in that regards, and that will become important from that perspective. Now, further workup is guided based upon the basic investigation. So if you have a high phosphorus with a normal renal function, the most important test to look at will be a parathyroid hormone, which becomes relevant. If you have a low phosphorus, look at magnesium first. If magnesium is normal, look at vitamin D and then go for calcitriol. Look for lymphocyte, and of course, if the lymphocyte counts are low, think of a possibility of Digeot syndrome, for which fish would be the appropriate investigation. You may rarely have a mildly elevated TSH, which may be a marker of pseudo-hypoparathyroidism. So very important to remember is that there is a relationship between PTH and calcium. If your calcium is low, your PTH should be sky high. So even if you have a normal PTH with a low calcium, that is very, very important, and that may suggest a possibility of hypoparathyroidism. Remember that the parathyroid hormone is thermolabile, has to be transferred in ice, otherwise there would be a risk of falsely low level of PTH, and you need to have a contextual assessment. So if your calcium level is low, the PTH level should be high, and this is clearly a pseudo-hypoparathyroidism or a normal response. If your PTH is low or normal, That is hypoparathyroidism. Now, if we now look at in terms of the key investigations of phosphorus, PTH, vitamin D, calcitriol, and urinary calcium, in vitamin D deficiency, so we expect phosphorus to be low in everybody, and of course, urinary calcium will be low in the setting of vitamin D deficiency. In vitamin D dependent rickets, the 25 hydroxy vitamin D levels will be normal, but calcitriol will be low. So there is a problem in calcitriol production. While in VDDR2, your calcitriol levels will be high. On the other hand, if your phosphorus is high, rule out renal failure. If that is normal, creatinine is normal, think of a pseudo-hypoparathyroidism in which PTH is high, and hypoparathyroidism and calcium sensing receptor defect where your levels of PTH are low. So the key investigations are phosphorus, PTH, and creatinine, and if required, 25 hydroxy vitamin D and calcitriol to reach a diagnosis. So the initial evaluation is to look at the magnesium, albumin, and phosphorus load. If they are not there, the phosphorus level is low or normal. Get a vitamin D level. If vitamin D is low, this is vitamin D deficiency. If vitamin D is normal or high, get a calcitriol level, which is low as VDDR1. If it's high, it is VDDR2. While if your phosphorus is high, you're dealing either with renal failure or a possibility of a pseudo-hypoparathyroidism. If creatinine is high, you confirm your diagnosis of renal insufficiency. If creatinine is normal and PTH is low or normal, this is hypo. While if it's high, it is pseudo-hypoparathyroidism. So the most important tests are magnesium, phosphorus, and creatinine. And then you can go ahead with PTH, and vitamin D required in certain cases, definitely calcitriol only in the rare cases from that regards. So we have this 4-month-old boy with nephrotic syndrome, and what we see that the calcium levels were reported as low, but this child is asymptomatic. So here, important thing is to correct for albumin, which was very, very low. And in this setting, once we corrected, it was normal. So whenever you have a total hypocalcemia in the absence of symptoms, you have to confirm the actual ionic levels, which become important. A 4-year-old girl with tetany and a low level of ionic calcium. What you're seeing is that the phosphorus is very high. So this is hypocalcemia with hyperphosphatemia. We're not dealing with vitamin D related causes here. The PTH is high. A diagnosis of pseudo-hypoparathyroidism was made. But if we look at our algorithm, if your phosphorus is high, the first thing to look at is creatinine. Now, what we are seeing here is that creatinine is high, making this a renal failure. So PHP should not be rushed out as far as immediate diagnosis is concerned. 1-year-old boy with neonatal seizures and is very severe hypocalcemia, total calcium of 5.4. Phosphorus is slightly on the higher side, though it is within the normal range for the age. PTH is not that elevated. It's inappropriately low. So this looks like a hypoparathyroidism. There is no response to IV calcium. This is a classical setting of hypomagnesemia. So when we checked the magnesium levels, they were really low. We did not find a urinary magnesium to be very high. It was found to be a TRMP6 defect, which is a transporter both in the intestine as well as in the kidneys. We required a very, very high dose of magnesium, around 20 times the normal dose, to achieve the response. 3-month-old girl with seizures and ionic hypocalcemia, which is proven, with a low level of phosphorus and also a low level of PTH. Now, both of them don't go hand in hand. If your PTH is low, phosphorus should have been high. So what's the problem? So when we thought of this as a hypoparathyroidism, it was very unlikely given the picture. So we evaluated for vitamin D level in this setting, which was found to be very low. Now, this is a classical scenario in which the PTH is not done appropriately. PTH is a thermolabile hormone. If it is not taken and transported appropriately, there would be a risk of falsely low levels, which was identified in this case. Now, we have a 1-week-old boy with seizures and ionic hypocalcemia. Phosphorus levels are very, very high. So hypocalcemia, hyperphosphatemia, excluding vitamin D related causes. Now the creatinine is normal. So we are dealing with a PTH related cause. The PTH level is low, suggesting hypoparathyroidism, but your job is not done. When you have such a young infant with hypoparathyroidism, think of DiGeorge syndrome. Look for the faces, look for the facial features, look for the cardiac defect, and do a FISH to identify this, because it has huge implications in that setting. Now, again, we have a 4-week-old boy with seizures with severe hypocalcemia. The phosphorus level is on the higher side. The creatinine is normal, so looks like a PTH-related cause. PTH is high. So now, are we dealing with pseudo hypoparathyroidism in this case? Now, what Weber has already said, that this is not the right age for pseudo hypoparathyroidism to emerge. And we need to remember that in cases of chronic vitamin D deficiency, there is an induced PTH resistance, which is reversible. So hypocalcemia, hyperphosphatemia is not always with high PTH suggestive of PHP. Exclude vitamin D deficiency, particularly in infancy. And vitamin D was very low. Once we corrected vitamin D, there was an improvement in terms of response, which was observed in this setting. 5-year-old boy with tetany, hypocalcemia, again with a very high phosphorus. Phosphorus is exceedingly high. Normal creatinine. PTH is on the lower side. So this is an interesting case. Looks like a hypoparathyroidism. And there was also a pigmentation which was there. And this case classically happened to be hypoparathyroidism, was started on calcium and calcitriol, but presented sometime later with hypercalcemia along with symptoms of weakness, lethargy, and hyponatremia. So this is a very, very important scenario. A child with hypoparathyroidism who was well controlled suddenly presents with hypercalcemia, reduced calcium requirement. Think of a possibility of a cortisol deficiency in the setting of an autoimmune polyendocrinopathy syndrome. So hypercalcemia in hypoparathyroidism, think cortisol deficiency, that becomes important. So this was APS in that regard. So in the final case, 10-year-old boy with seizure, then we can see there was a cataract, there is calcification in the intracranial region, there is brachymetacarpia, and this clearly was suggestive of a case of pseudo hypoparathyroidism. Phosphorus was sky high, creatinine was normal, and in that scenario, PTH was high. So this is classical PHP, stocky build, short stature, overweight, cutaneous calcification, intracranial calcification, brachymetacarpia, cataract. So here you should think of PHP. So as with other causes like hyponatremia and other scenario like hyperkalemia, management depends upon symptoms. So if the symptoms are there, give calcium gluconate 1 ml per kg of 10%, and we may repeat if the symptoms are present. After that, start infusion. Now, the problem is most people give recurrent boluses of calcium, which causes loss of calcium in the urine. It's always better to give 10 ml per kg per day, which is like 90 milligrams per kg per day in infusion fluid. And then you add calcium and calcitriol. Very importantly, if you do not add calcitriol, your vitamin D levels will not build. And once you stop infusion, you will develop hypocalcemia. Now, if there are no symptoms, but the calcium levels are very low, and we have mentioned that as preterm below 6, term below 7, and postneonatal below 7.5, roughly 1.5 millimoles, 1.75, and around 1.9 millimoles per liter. In that scenario, you should start with infusion. No need of giving acute bolus. If there are no symptoms, start with calcitriol. Now, this calcitriol is only to build up the vitamin D level because the half-life is short, and then you can start with the long-acting vitamin D. In that perspective, then no response, you can go ahead with again infusion in that perspective. Now, very importantly about the chronic cases of hypoparathyroidism and pseudo hypoparathyroidism, the treatment largely is in the form of calcium, which is given at a high dose, 50 to 75 milligram per kg per day, up to 3 grams in adults. And calcitriol, which is given as 25 to 50 nanogram per kg per day. You titrate the calcium level, especially in hypoparathyroidism, maintain a calcium around 8, 8.5 because of the risk of hypercalciuria. In pseudo hypoparathyroidism, maintain around 9.5 to 10 to avoid the skeletal damage which will happen. You can also use alpha calcium. Go and have a look at our website, and there are a lot of resources available, the courses which are available, as well as the books and the mobile application.